Welcome to the Hang Time Podcast Playoff Edition. Sekou Smith at headquarters here in Atlanta for a brief stopover during the playoffs here. The Hall of Famer, David Aldridge, joining me this week on the podcast. Huge night of action Wednesday, highlighted by LeBron's buzzer beater to win Game 5 over the Pacers. That series still going. Epic rally from the Oklahoma City Thunder to force a Game 6 against the Utah Jazz. John Schumann will join us a little bit later. But before we get to all that, let's get TNT's in the morning tip master himself, David Aldridge here. DA, what's up, man? How you doing?
Hey, cool. What's up, buddy? I'm doing good.
I'm good, man. I'm praying for drama every night when I don't need to. It's ready made for us. It's coming in the form of LeBron James fighting for his playoff life. Just looking at it from afar, what do you make of what's going on with LeBron and the Cavs trying to wrestle these Pacers? I mean, it's more drama than I expected.
Well, I mean, I think it's two things. I think the fear factor is pretty much gone with Cleveland. I don't, people obviously respect LeBron. They know LeBron's a great player. Mm-hmm. Kevin Love is a terrific player as well. But I don't think anybody's really scared to play Cleveland. You know what I mean? So, yeah. It's just a different team this year and not quite as good. So, Indiana's been playing good all year. Shoot, I mean, they've had I think it's fair to say they're the biggest surprise in the league this year. I mean, they are to me anyway.
Right.
And so, they come at it in attack mode. Oladipo's always in attack mode and, plays that way every night, even when he's not scoring, shooting the ball that well. He's got a bunch of good players, man. I mean, it's a good squad. So, the difference between, look at, the every series in the East, basically, I mean, there's not much difference between any of these teams, right? Yeah. I mean, 1 through 8, 2 and 7 through. Philly was better than Miami, I grant you that. But the other three have been pretty tight. There's not a whole lot of difference between 1 and 8 in this conference this year.
I agree, and I feel like the Pacers have blown a couple of really golden opportunities, DA, against a team. You can't count on LeBron breaking down in these moments because he's come through so many times. Do you feel like the controversial ending, the calls and these things, do you expect the NBA to review the replay guidelines this summer after some of the things we've seen in these playoffs? I'm in Houston last night watching the Cavs before we get started out there, and I thought that was a goaltend. Just to my naked eye, I thought that's a goaltend, and they missed it. And you come out afterwards, and Joe Borgia acknowledges as much. Do you think it's time for a review of the guidelines? I'm not sure about. I'm not sure what would you change, on that particular thing. I mean, it just blew the call. It was a goaltend. I think we all agree that it was a goaltend. Maybe you could say that maybe that's reviewable. I don't know. I mean, that might be one way you can go to that in the last 2 minutes. Make every call reviewable, I guess. I suppose that's one way you could address it. But in terms of the call itself, I mean, I'm not sure there's a lot you could do to change that particular rule. Right.
It's pretty cut and dry, and I thought, they just blew the call.
Yeah.
So it's, we'll get the last 2 minute report, and I'm sure it'll say, hey, we should have been goaltending. Unfortunately for Indiana, the weird thing is that I thought Victor made 2 mistakes on that play, and the guys on TNT made reference to one, which is he should have dunked it.
Right.
Why are you going in for the layup in the first place? You should just go ahead and dunk that, or try to dunk it.
Try and dunk it, yeah.
I actually thought he should have just pulled up after he crossed LeBron over the first time. LeBron's out of position. He's not going to recover.
Yeah.
So you have an elbow jumper where you're wide open with 4 seconds left. I mean, why wouldn't you take that, So I thought he made 2 mistakes on that play. You should have just taken it right to the cup like they said, he had another shot open before LeBron could even recover. So.
Yeah.
There's no doubt it was a goaltend, I thought, and should have been called as such.
Yeah, and it's weird. You would think for as many times we've seen LeBron get a chase down block on somebody, I thought Oladipo was going to try and make a reverse layup, and he went and tried to lay it up off the glass like that. I'm like, man, you can't get away with that, knowing LeBron is coming behind you. Like, there's no way he's not going to try and block that. But it's, watching the Timberwolves young guys in the playoffs, watching some of these younger players, not all of them, because Ben Simmons and Embiid have been super impressive. There have been some young guys who are tearing it up in these playoffs, but watching Karl Anthony Towns and Wiggins in that, Rockets Timberwolves series, watching some of these other young stars struggle in these playoff moments, it's reminded me, DA, that you don't know how physical, how energized you have to be, how tense those moments are until you get into them. And I asked Tom Thibodeau about it, last week on an off day. Did he feel like Cat and his young guys needed to experience this before they would fully comprehend what they've been told by him or by some of the veteran players? It's been interesting to watch who has wilted a little bit in that playoff spotlight and who hasn't.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is that, you just can't. You just have no idea what the playoffs are like until you experience it. And just the kind of possession by possession, how every possession is important, and that's true. I also think, honestly, I thought Minnesota didn't do a very good job of utilizing Towns. I mean, I thought they need to put him more, in a place where he can attack the basket. Part of that, and part of that's on him too. I understand that, but you got to run some things for him where he can, where he doesn't have to do too much patting with the ball, and he can just go right into his moves.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of learning too. You got to know how to use your guy in the best situation. I know he's a versatile guy. He can step out and shoot threes, and you want to take advantage of that. But I also think there's a time where you have to realize this is a 6'11" dude that can put the ball in the basket. You need to just figure out a way to get him to do that. Him, especially if Houston's going to put Harden or Tucker or undersized guys like that on him. The longer he's patting the ball and trying to, post them up and do all that sort of thing, the easier it's going to be. More opportunity, I should say. They're going to have more opportunity to attack him on the dribble.
Yeah.
And there's going to be more opportunity for the defense to help, for the guards to dig in, for the wings to dig in and make it harder for him. You need to get him some quick hitters, some things where he just catches and goes to the basket and utilizes his size and explosiveness. So I think that's something that was a mistake, but there's no question the young guys from Minnesota especially, and that's why it's impressive when you see, DeLon Wright in Toronto and some of the other young guys who have actually played really well in these first round of the playoffs who haven't had a ton of experience.
Yeah. You think the Thunder just delayed the inevitable, or can they come back in that series and win that thing?
Well, you know what? It's funny. Jeff Van Gundy always says this, that you can't give away playoff games. You just can't lose a game and say, well, we'll go get the next one.
Right.
I would certainly say Utah should be favored. They'll be at home. That crowd is tremendous. They've been good at home. But I tell you what, man, you can't just be blowing 25-point lead. I think that's hard to come back from. You give a guy you saw what happened. You gave Westbrook a sniff of it.
Yes.
And it just went nuts. And so I would be very worried if I were Utah. Yeah. Because that series was over. That game was over. The crowd was out of it. There was no reason to believe that they were going to be able to come back. And I'm stunned that they got back in the game. I'm stunned that Utah let them get back in the game.
Yeah.
And, you just hope that doesn't bite Utah in the butt coming back. Maybe it won't. Maybe they'll win by 30 in Game 6. But, now you've given Westbrook and Paul George a reason to keep competing. You know what I mean? Like, now if I'm them, what you're saying is we just got one game on the road and we get Game 7 at home on our racket. Yep. You know what I mean? So, that's not impossible. That's something we do all the time. So let's just go get this game on the road and come back here and win this thing. So that's what will worry the heck out of me if I were Utah right now.
Yeah. That whole Thunder situation, too, is too soon, I guess, to break it down. But clearly, win or lose, whether they get to the next round or not, every step they take impacts their summer later on. I have no idea what Paul George is going to do. I have no idea what happens to Billy Donovan if they don't get out of this first round. But I would not want to be Sam Presti this summer having to sort through the mess. It's amazing what they've gone through in terms of personnel. You look at KD, Russ, Harden on separate teams now since that 2012 finals.
Right.
Serge Ibaka on another team. I mean, it's staggering to me what's happened to the Thunder when we thought they might be that team of the future. And they could be getting bounced again in the first round. I feel for Sam because I know how smart he is. I know how good a job he's done, DA. But does that speak to just the true uncertainty of whatever you got going on, the staying power when you look at a San Antonio or somebody else that's been able to maintain for so long, how hard it is for everybody else to get to that point?
Well, there's no question. I mean, look, the history of the league is there's a lot more teams that failed than succeeded.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's so many more teams that didn't get it done than did get it done.
Mm-hmm.
And so, nothing is promised to you, whether it's injuries or free agency or whatever it is. You got to strike while the iron's hot. There's no doubt about that. And so that OKC situation, I know Presti gets a lot of heat for the Harden trade, and I keep pointing out two things. Number one, when your owner tells you I'm not paying the luxury tax, you can't re-sign James Harden.
Right.
If you're going to keep Westbrook and Durant, you just can't do it.
Right.
And I defy anybody at the time. It's easy to say now, Sekou. It's easy to say now, well, they should have kept Harden. But at the time of those three guys, and you can only keep two, which two are you keeping?
No, you're right.
And you know what I'm saying? So anybody who tells me, I would have kept Harden, they're lying. So, I mean, they're just lying because they're using that selective memory.
Right.
Nobody would have kept James Harden at the time over those other two guys. They just wouldn't.
You're right.
Based on what you knew about them at the time.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing is, even though they did lose Harden, that trade is what allowed them to draft Steven Adams. So, I mean, you do have to look at all of it when you assess the deal, But you're right. It's been a lot of talent coming through that pipeline, and just the one finals appearance to show for it has got to be very frustrating for them.
Yeah, no question. On to different teams, DA. I feel like if you're talking about striking while it's hot, is there anybody hotter right now than the Philadelphia 76ers? Hell the process.
No. I mean, they have perfectly put, a team together with great young talent that's just hard to guard because they're so athletic, and they just create so many problems for you, combined with really good veterans who are all playing well. I mean, that's not going to happen every year, so there's no guarantee that, the Sixers are going to have this kind of run again.
Right.
Because it's so unusual. Like, just say everybody all their veterans, Redick and Bellinelli and Ilyasova, all of them are playing good.
Yeah.
I mean, that's unusual in a playoff series. Usually somebody struggles for one reason or another. But they're all playing good, so they need to ride this as long as they can, and they certainly have a great opportunity. I mean, whether it's Boston or Milwaukee in the next round, I would certainly think Philly would be favored now based on what we know, and certainly have an opportunity to win those series. And then you're in the conference finals, and, they'll probably either be Toronto or Cleveland that they'll face. And, all due respect to Toronto and Cleveland, I don't think if I'm Philly, I'd be scared of playing either one of those teams with what I got. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, with that size, that length,
ready to rock. Yeah.
They got everything. And I was, John Schumann has been covering some of that series. He was talking to me about the fact that just how long, athletic, and large Philly's roster is. And I was like, you don't think about that until you look out there on the floor. All those, outside of J.J. Redick and McConnell, everybody's 6'6" or taller, basically. Everybody put on the floor is 6'6" or taller.
Right.
And can shoot.
And long.
Yeah, and can shoot.
Long.
They got, strange as it sounds, they got the perfectly built team for today's NBA, which nobody would have said that about the Sixers even a year ago. You wouldn't have been talking about them like that. DA, what's your take on, and we talked about this last week on the podcast, Greg Popovich, the entire NBA family, prayers are out for him, the loss of his wife and just what he's going through. But this is going to be a strange offseason in San Antonio, maybe the strangest we've seen in 2 decades.
Oh, no question. They never had this kind of uncertainty going into an off season. I mean, even though, even when Robinson and Duncan were aging and not what they once were, they still did so many things that helped facilitate winning. You know what I mean? So even though they weren't the guys that maybe scored all the points anymore, you still had such a base to build on. And then when Duncan got old, you had Kawhi Leonard to build on.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they always had somebody in the wings to kind of take over. And, you know, until they resolve Kawhi's situation one way or the other, you know, we just aren't going to know what's going on there. It's just going to be uncertainty. They have never had to deal with this, you know, with Tony Parker, a free agent, saying he wants to come back. You know, Ginobili is 40 years old. He'll be 41 years old on opening night next year. You know, and you just don't know what the deal is with Kawhi Leonard, whether he wants to be there anymore or not. Boy, that's a lot of stuff to get through in one off season, man. And, you know, that it's just never happened before.
Do you trade him? I mean, like, I know it sounds crazy, but do you trade if Kawhi says, you know, I'm not trying to be here? You got to move him, right? You got to get something for him.
Clear, you know, and that's where you got to have the discussions with him over the next, you know, few weeks. You know, you certainly want to have an answer before the draft, right? I mean, you need to know what's going on with him. And yeah, if he says, you know what, it's just not for me. I'm not going to accept your 219, which will be an interesting conversation.
I don't
No,
know.
no thanks. I won't take the 219 million. Sorry.
Keep your money.
But if he says that, then yeah, they probably do have to trade him. You know,
Wow.
I think the good thing for San Antonio is that there's about 27 teams that would say, "What do you want?"
Exactly.
You know, and they could have a nice little bid, little auction for him, and see what the best package they can get for him is. And they would get some good packages. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So. It's going to be, but to your point, it is unprecedented, uncharted water for these guys.
Unreal. I mean, it's just crazy thinking about how quickly things change. Speaking of that, I saw the Pelicans on March 27th play the Trailblazers and lose at home. Tough game. Dame Lillard went crazy. If that night somebody had told me the Pelicans were going to dominate the Portland Trailblazers the way they did in the first round, only sweep in the entire first round. Anthony Davis, Drew Holiday, Rajon Rondo went to work on Portland. So now we got the one matchup that we know is set for the second round, Pelicans and Warriors. Do they have a legit shot at scaring the Warriors in putting a little nervousness into that whole situation for Golden State?
I think they have a chance of scaring them, as you put it. I don't know if they can beat them. Mm-hmm. But scare them, yeah. I think they can definitely do that. Look, they found a way to play that works for them, and it's playing faster. You know, I mean, they're playing so much faster now than they did with Boogie on the floor, and that's not a criticism. It's just, you know, personnel. I mean, when you have different personnel, you have to play a different way, and so with Mirotic in the lineup, they can play faster, get more possessions, be more kind of scrappy. I'm just not sure. I just wonder, when I look at their team, who guards KD?
Yeah.
That's what my first, second, and third question on this squad is, who guards KD? Now, they tried a lot of different people in the play, you know, when they played him in the regular season. But I don't think you can put AD on him.
Yeah.
You just don't want AD to pick up early fouls and have to go out and guard. You can't have him guarding out the three-point line and doing all that stuff. I mean, who else? But if you put anybody else on him, you know, Kevin can shoot over everybody else that they can put on him. Yeah. You know, so I just think that's going to be a very difficult matchup for New Orleans defensively. How do they keep KD from just going off every game? Yeah. You know, and Golden State's hard enough to defend, but if you don't have an answer for KD from jump, I just don't know how you beat them 4 times. Right. I mean, you could slow them down. They'll maybe shoot themselves in the foot like they did against San Antonio, where they just had some real sloppy games handling the ball. But I just don't know what you do with that guy.
Yeah.
Looking at the personnel that New Orleans has.
Yeah, I don't know, like you said, which guy is going, you know, you're going to put Darius Miller or Solomon. Who you going to send to the guillotine to try and deal with KD in a best of 7. Yeah.
And you can now they have what they do have is, they do have a guy in Davis that can, obviously protect the front of the rim. So someone like a Draymond Green that makes a living kind of cutting offensive rebounds, making himself available, may not be as effective offensively as he would be against other people. And so that's an advantage. Klay Thompson loves to cut backdoor and continue moving, and that's an advantage for them. And they can put Jrue Holiday on Klay Thompson and maybe take their chances. So it's not like they can't stop him at all. I think they have a chance to maybe get some stops, but I do wonder about the KD matchup and how they can deal with that.
Yeah.
That's what I just don't know.
Yeah, and we saw how Portland struggled to match, the Pelicans when they came at him with this new look. And I started thinking about Terry Stotts and all these other coaches, DA, who are in the crosshairs right now. We got Mike Budenholzer and the Hawks agree to part ways. We got 6 coaching spots officially open right now with potentially more to come. We don't know what's going to happen with the Bucks. We don't know what's going to happen with the Pistons. According to Shams Charania, J.B. Bickerstaff is negotiating a contract to become the permanent coach for the Grizzlies. But we got the Suns job open. We got the Magic job open. The Knicks are interviewing everybody, on planet Earth. The Hornets job is open. Which job do you think of all of these, DA, is the one that is in the highest demand in terms of will attract the best candidate?
Look, I mean, I think of the ones that we know are open. Mm-hmm. To me, I would say New York for 2 reasons. As crazy as Dolan may be, he will spend money, right? And it's New York. You're just going to have a better opportunity of attracting free agents to New York, I think, than you do some of those other places.
Right.
So I still think that's a powerful thing. And you've got, Porzingis coming back next year, presumably. So you do have a player, and they're going to, probably get another good player in the draft. So you have some pieces to build around. But, if the Milwaukee job opens up, come on, everybody's going to want that gig because of Giannis. Had the opportunity of coaching Giannis. So if that job does open up and they decide that they're not going to put Joe Prunty in there permanently, then definitely I would say Milwaukee is the gig.
Yeah. I knew this was coming, by the way. Last summer, we went into the offseason, with no coaching movement, and I thought it's going to be Katie by the door next summer. It's going to be a freak show because rarely do we have that much silence, on the coaching carousel going into an offseason. What does a team like the Hawks, when you got a situation, basically the same situation Phoenix is in with, and I think the Suns have better talent right now in terms of young guys that you can build around. What are you selling to a coach if you're the Hawks? Just the opportunity to be a head coach? Because you got no framework for this guy to come in and be competitive, to have a chance at winning. I mean, you're so early in the process for a franchise like that that's rebuilding from the ground up. How do you sell these jobs? I don't understand how these teams sell these jobs to these coaches other than, hey, we got a guy who's dying to get back in, or we got a guy who's so anxious for his first opportunity, he's willing to take a dead-end situation as his first job.
Well, I think what you would do in their situation, and Orlando's also, I think to a lesser degree, is you've got to sell it as an opportunity to develop young players, to put a program in that's going to not just develop young players, but is going to stick to that.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing you can do, to me, if you're a team like them, is start to panic and we're going to trade assets and do all of those things in an attempt to start winning right away. But you can only do that. You can only go so far with that, right? And you just can't, I don't think, build a championship team through trades and things like that. So, you do the Brooklyn thing, which is hire a young guy, a development guy like a Kenny Atkinson that's great with young players and tries to make them better every day. And you just live with those L's. You got to live with those L's. You made that decision a couple of years ago. If you're Atlanta,
right?
You had a team that was a playoff team that was good enough to contend, and you made a decision. We were only going to spend so much on Al Horford. Oh, okay. Well, this is the result when you make decisions like that. You know, you got to start rebuilding, and then you got to stick with the rebuild. You got to keep having success. They have 4 first-round picks in the next 2 years. Well, you got to hit on at least 2 of them. I mean, 2 of them have to be guys that come in right away and are not just guys, but are productive guys, right? Or guys that can really help you. And you add that to Collins and Prince and some of their other guys, and maybe you start to grow a little bit. But it's more about, to me, how they do in the draft than it is, you know, who the coach is. Because whoever the coach is, they're going to take some L's right away.
It's just, I mean, this league is so strange, DA. Just thinking about the way the power shifts from season to season. We got a huge summer coming up for so many franchises, for so many different reasons. I was trying to think who's going to have the most, you know, game-changing summer of all these franchises. We figured Paul George and his situation with the Thunder, that changes dramatically. Then it always comes back to the epicenter of the basketball universe in LeBron. I mean, Cleveland, no matter what they do, no matter if they get out of this first round or not, this is going to be the summer of LeBron all over again. And nobody knows what he's going to do. I mean, I can't tell you how many people have theories about where he's going, what he might do. Nobody knows. This dude's he's holding our July hostage yet again.
Oh, well, that's the deal. That's the game. You know, so yeah, there's we don't know, and we're not going to know. Yeah. Till he decides where he wants to go, and that will set everything else in motion. It is going to be, you know, you certainly look at LA with the Lakers and you think, okay, they're going to do something. I mean, you know, they have to make some kind of move. Right. They can't just sit pat and say, we'll wait for 19. You know, you can't keep kind of kicking the can down the road. So they're going to have to, at some point, be successful and get one of these free agents in there. Now, whether that's Paul George this summer or Westbrook after next summer or whoever, or LeBron, whoever it is. They got to start they have to get somebody. I just think you don't get free agents until you prove you can get free agents. You know what I mean? Right. So they have to have a successful courtship with one of these primary difference-making free agents, and that will start the ball rolling for them, I think, in terms of going forward. But until they do that, then they're just talking, you know. And so I don't think that gets them anywhere. You know, that's why they brought in Magic and Rob Pelinka to close the sale with some of these guys. Well, they got to show they can do it. It's time to roll. Yeah, it's just it's just unbelievable how much is going on. We could see, like you mentioned earlier, we could see the end of Manu Ginobili's career. Dwayne Wade could be done in Miami. So much, you know, shape-shifting going on this summer. And unfortunately for you, that means working all summer. That means we're going to be working all summer, which is a great thing. Welcome to our world, right? Yeah, don't get me wrong. It's a great thing. But it means, you know, more and more of this drama unfolding throughout the course of the summer. David Aldridge, the Hall of Famer, joining me here on the Hang Time Podcast. I know you don't have much time. Enjoy the little bit you do have at home, man. I appreciate you. And we'll talk to you down the road. See you down the road. Certainly see you come finals time. Absolutely, Sekou. Thanks, buddy. All right. Thanks, DA. Love talking to David Aldridge here on the Hang Time Podcast. Everybody knows what kind of knowledge DA is working with, so always good to get his insights, kind of pepper him like that about everything that's going on, everything that's going to be going on throughout the course of this, the rest of these playoffs and into the offseason. Right now, though, we need to pick the brain of one of our other favorites, my main man, John Schumann, joining us for the playoff edition of the Schumann Stat. Schu, what's happening? What's up? Man, what are you doing, sir? And I know you've been back and forth between a couple series. You're going to get a chance to dig in on this wild Wizards Raptors series again. Does Toronto finally look like they're ready to finish this thing off, or what? I mean, I don't know. Like that Game 5, fourth quarter, they were down 5 early fourth quarter, I believe, and. I mean, for me, I felt like that game was just going to be a huge game for the Raptors, just beyond this series, just because it's sort of a referendum on what they've done this season. Right. You know, it's you know, just a tough spot for them again, you know, and another, you know, for the fourth year in a row.
And when it came down to it, I mean, they just made a few more plays than the Wizards did in the fourth quarter. They just went on a huge run in the fourth quarter. They made some big defensive plays, forcing turnovers. Heck, Jonas Valanciunas stripped John Wall clean on a pick and roll.
Yeah.
That was just a huge play in that fourth quarter. So I don't think they've solved everything, and anything I think can happen Friday night in Game 6 in Washington. So I think everything is still sort of a referendum on the Raptors going. Like, I don't think they've answered anything just yet. They answered Game 5, but as far as the series as a whole, they still got some work to do.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting. It's in previous years you sort of wanted to trap DeRozan and Lowry and make them move the ball and then see what else could happen. And that was the formula to stopping the Raptors in the playoffs. And then this year it's sort of been the opposite. The Wizards tried that in games 1 and 2 and it didn't work. And then since then they've been sort of switching or playing softer on pick and rolls and forcing those guys, keeping the ball in the hands of those guys basically, and staying at home on the Raptors shooters. And that has worked to slow down that Toronto offense. So it's kind of fascinating that it's sort of the opposite of what has worked in years past. And I guess that goes to explain the Raptors' change this year.
Yeah. The Wizards, Raptors, they look, to me, and I don't want to just be disrespectful to either one of them, but it's like when I look over the East and I see Philly and I see Boston, I see teams on the rise, and I feel like the Wizards and Raptors, man, they got to feel the pressure that, hey, if we don't get this done now, like if we don't get a chance to play our way to the conference finals and maybe take advantage of what looks like a vulnerable, Cleveland team and get to the finals now, that window closes. I mean, Philly is the present and the future. Boston is clearly a team that's legitimate now, but when healthy with Kyrie and Gordon Hayward and whatever else they add and the growth of their young guys becomes another team that slides into a contenders role in the East. You've gotten a chance to watch Philly in these playoffs. How impressive are they in the flesh compared to what they look like for myself and other people who are watching them, from the other side, from on TNT or whatever? What are we missing about that Philly team that you have to be there to see them in person to truly comprehend?
I mean, they are just a complete team, I think, right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were a good defensive team all year, but their offense has just really taken off in the last 2-3 months. I think the additions of Marco Bellinelli and Ersan Ilyasova were huge for that team, just to add more shooting to what they had already. But, I mean, it's really amazing. Like, the foundation for this was built 5 years ago when Brett Brown took over. I mean, they're basically playing the same way they played, 5 years ago when they stumped, 2 years ago when they won 10 games.
Right.
It's just they've added talent. And, they took a step forward last year with Embiid playing a little bit. They took a big step forward this year. But when you think about it, they were 25. This team was 25-25. And, sort of mediocre offensively. The worst fourth quarter team in the league at the All-Star break. And since then, they have just taken off, and especially offensively, they, with the additional shooting, with Simmons, gaining confidence every game, and his just an amazing ability to attack and get into the paint and finish or find guys that are open, and guys are always open because this team just doesn't stop moving. Yeah. They lead the playoffs in both player movement and ball movement as far as, distance traveled on offense and passes on offense. And like, you'll watch some other offenses, if you take away the initial action or the first couple of actions on a possession, they get stuck. Philly doesn't get stuck. They just keep moving. And, Redick and Bellinelli especially just firing off of pin downs and running all over the place, getting the ball and launching right away. They're not necessarily successful on all those shots, but it's the threat of them running around and shooting that just takes your grabs your defense's attention and opens up stuff for everybody else. So the growth spurt that they've had in the last 2 months is unlike anything I've ever seen. Like,
really?
I can't remember any team just improving so much over 2 months.
There's not. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's one specific thing you can point to and say that's when it clicked or that's when it changed. But it, like you said, it's just been gradually. You look up and they've gotten better and better. At doing what Brett Brown has been preaching to them forever.
And the scary thing is Embiid's only played 3 games and he's looked kind of rusty offensively, right? Like Brown is Brown even said it before Game 5 of the Heat series. He's like, I think we have just going forward in this postseason, we have the most room to improve. Yeah. Right? Because Embiid, we just got Embiid back and he was he's had some issues offensively. He's been incredible defensively protecting the rim. Yeah. But he basically says, I just want us, the longer we can stay in this, the better we're going to be, basically. And also, the Embiid factor, but they're so young, and it's like every playoff game is so important to, these young guys sort of learning how to play and how to deal with, playoff basketball. So it's like the learning curve is highest for this team too. So it's, I don't know what the ceiling is. I mean, maybe they could go to the finals. Who knows?
Unbelievable. I mean, it would be unbelievable for them to do that.
But I mean, I don't think any other team in the East looks better right now.
No, I agree with you. I agree. And I would be the first to tell you. You remember some of our conversations we've had over the years about Sam Hinkie and the process and what they had going on. I hated the idea, hated it, but it's hard to argue with these results. When you see it on the other side.
We talked about it on here a couple weeks ago, I think. And the one point that we sort of didn't make is that the whole point of it was to get as many shots at talent as possible. It's like it wasn't an arrogant thing. It was almost a humble thing, like knowing that, hey, I don't know, I'm not going to nail every one of these draft picks. Right. But if I get as many draft picks, like he got, Noel's gone, Okafor gone,
Michael Carter Williams gone,
yeah, and so it's not like he knew that, hey, I'm gonna get all these draft picks and I'm gonna be the best drafter in the league. He knew he's not, and he knows that you got a X% shot of getting a good player out of a top 5 pick. And knew that we just have to maximize the possibilities, and that's what's paid off. I mean, just look at Saric has been really good for this team. Yes. And then the other part of the whole quote unquote process is the development of Covington. Like that's a guy that they sort of picked up off the scrap heap and developed into one of the best defensive players in the league, and a guy who can shoot threes.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It also changed, like I said. And I mentioned this to GA. This summer is so pivotal for so many franchises. It's strange to see who's in like a great position now that wasn't maybe as recently as last summer, and then there's some other teams that could see everything they've built or everything they've done for the past few years go away. You know what I mean? It's just the way it breaks. Whether it's free agency. Who's a free agent when? The unexpected, like San Antonio might be dealing with Kawhi. Who do you think is poised? That's not fair. I mean, because we don't know what happens with LeBron. But if we take LeBron's situation out of the equation, who's poised to have the biggest change, like game-changing offseason, you think, in the Eastern Conference? If we exclude LeBron and whatever he might do, who else has an opportunity to make the biggest, change in terms of moving up the pecking order in the Eastern Conference?
That's a great question. Because Charlotte and Detroit are just kind of stuck, right? Yeah. Like with as far as their payroll and everything. I think Brooklyn is going to take it sort of slow and steady. Although if D'Angelo Russell or somebody can make a leap for them next year, that could pay off. Right. Philly's going to keep growing. Like they're only going to get better.
That's true.
Yeah, Ben Simmons can't shoot. Markel Fultz has basically done minimal for them. He wasn't even in the rotation the last couple playoff games, and he can't shoot yet. I mean, if those two guys, spend the summer getting up a couple thousand shots a day or something like that. Who knows? And obviously Boston. I mean, they're going to get one All-Star back who didn't play this year, and another back from who didn't play in the postseason. So
right.
And there's and like I said, there's other teams that are just stuck. Like Miami is kind of stuck with their payroll and the Hassan Whiteside contract.
I could have spent a whole podcast, by the way, talking about Hassan Whiteside and how disappointed I was in his playoff performance.
I just go back to when they signed that contract. It did not. I mean, and that was when they were negotiating with Wade too. So, like, if Wade says, all right, you're not giving me, $20 million a year, but you're going to give this guy $20 million a year. And Whiteside had basically given them half of a season of he could be a good player, right? Like half of a season of, he's got nice potential. And it wasn't even, and so that contract I think is obviously haunting them at this point because he was basically unplayable in the playoffs, even with a big center that, you should need, somebody like that. Plus, they've got Olynyk, and they've got Bam Adebayo, who's going to be a terrific.
I liked him. I like what I saw from him.
He's had some great moments this year. He's going to be really good. And obviously, if he takes a big step forward this summer, that makes Whiteside even less useful to that team.
Yeah, it's funny. I tweeted this out the other day, Shu, watching the games, and I'll get you out of here because, like I said, I know you're busy. I appreciate it, but I'm trying to remember when I felt this good about the young players coming up in the league, and not just one or two. I remember when KD and Russ in that young Thunder team was cooking, and I thought, man, these guys got a chance to really be, and then the Warriors showed up, and it was just a couple teams. Man, I love the young talent from coast to coast. It is ridiculous to me how many good young players are on some of these rosters right now. You wonder, well, who's the next generation of stars? Who are those guys that are going to take over when LeBron and his generation finally, exit the stage and Steph and KD and that generation who are maybe just a few years younger than LeBron, but they assume the elder statesman role. I mean, there's so many good young players. And to get a chance to see him in the playoffs, to me, makes it even more obvious. It magnifies it that much more when you see some of these, quality young players working out and doing so well in the postseason. It feels good to me in terms of the health of the league, and especially when it comes to quality players on so many different rosters.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really good to watch. I mean, I had a hard time voting for most improved this year. I knew who I had number one. But beyond that, it was tough because there was a lot of second and third year guys, or third and fourth year guys that made big jumps. And there was a lot of second year guys that made big jumps. Guys like Sabonis and Taurean Prince and Jamal Murray and Brandon Ingram and, just a bunch of guys that took a big step forward and became not just, the talent was always there and always obvious, but just doing things that lead to winning. That for me is always important. The game, the point of basketball is to outscore your opponent, and so you have to do things that make your team better, not just do things that get the highlights. And to see a bunch of guys like that make a big jump in that regard was really cool to see. And like you said, I mean, there's guys all over the place that you may forget a little bit, and then you watch them once and you're like, oh, this guy is good, Yeah.
It's just it's a fun time to be affiliated with or covering and around the NBA, man. Playoff basketball, Shu. We wait all season for it, and then we get here and you feel like you're chasing the train, man. It's going to be interesting to watch and see how this stuff unfolds. I'm assuming I'll see you at some point. Our playoff paths will cross at some point here in the coming weeks. So in the meantime, the Hang Time Podcast will have to do, brother. Appreciate you.
All right.
Be safe on the road.
Yep, you got it.
All right, John Schumann with the Schumann stat in a roundabout way. We kind of I think we had a stat in there somewhere, but, John Hartzell, you know how it is. It's playoff time. What are we going to do? Greg Anthony is somewhere. He's calling games somewhere. I forget where. I've heard his voice, seen him on a TV in a press room or something. We'll find GA next week. We'll make sure we get him back here on the Hang Time Podcast next week. Shout out to our man John Schumann, as always, joining us here, and to the Hall of Famer, TNT analyst, sideline reporter extraordinaire, morning tip master, insider, Hall of Famer, David Aldridge, for joining us. We will definitely get back on the horse and ride here next week. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Hang Time on Apple Podcasts for new episodes all throughout these NBA playoffs. And don't forget to leave a magical review telling us how much you loved it. We'll see you right here next week on the Hang Time Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Hang Time Podcast, and be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts for a new episode every Thursday this season. And as always, say Kuna Matata. Tata.